Common sense would dictate a second Scottish independence referendum that could bring an end to the United Kingdom should take place in the autumn of 2018. That's the conclusion of Scottish First Minister and Scottish National Party leader Nicola Sturgeon in remarks she gave to the BBC on Wednesday. Without specifying an exact date, Sturgeon told the BBC that by autumn next year it will be clear what kind of Brexit deal the UK will secure from the EU.
Within that window, I guess, of when the sort of outline of a UK deal becomes clear and the UK exiting the EU, I think would be the common sense time for Scotland to have that choice, if that is the road we choose to go down.
Sturgeon's comments come as a new poll of Scottish public opinion puts support for independence at 50%. In 2014, when the last referendum on Scottish independence was held, 45% of Scots backed an exit of the UK, with 55% of voters opting to remain inside the 310-year-old political union. Well, to discuss the First Minister's comments further, we're now joined by former Scottish National Party leader and SNP MP Gordon Wilson. Gordon Wilson, thanks for joining us on World in Focus. Is Nicola Sturgeon right to say the common sense time to hold a second independence referendum would be the autumn of 2018, when support for independence hasn't really increased significantly since the last referendum in 2014?
Well, my understanding is that there was an increase about a month ago to 49%. But of course, still 49% is a losing figure, and I would prefer it to be much higher. Preferably, I think the sensible course would be to fix the date as and when we know the outcome of the Brexit negotiations. For this reason, if, for example, the referendum process was started and the government slipped in a Northern Ireland arrangement to give Scotland and Northern Ireland access to the single market, it would pull the rug from underneath the SNP. So I think you've got to be very cautious there.
And is Nicola Sturgeon being forced into holding a second independence referendum by the influx of new members who joined the party after the last referendum, many of whom are quite impatient for Scottish independence?
Yes, and possibly of little political experience too. I think that it's a test of her leadership, because she came in when the party was at the top and has done extremely well since then. But we know that if there is a referendum, one of two casualties will be the British Prime Minister, Mrs May, or Mrs Sturgeon, because only one can win. So it's a risky thing from both the aspects of both Mrs May and Mrs Sturgeon.
And when do you think would be a common sense time to hold a second independence referendum?
You can't be pushed into a specific date, because that would be silly. But quite obviously the negotiations are going to take place. The direction of travel will become clear, and there's a long way to go yet before there is a solution. For example, I'll give you one indication. As far as Scotland is concerned, I don't think we'll get much out of this Southern English government at all. But they have a problem over Northern Ireland and the peace agreement, and also with the Republic of Ireland that's going to be left isolated from the European Union, geographically at least. And so there will be a deal done there. And you can imagine the impact if Northern Ireland got a special deal giving access to the single market and Scotland didn't. It would turn the tables. There would be a tremendous swing towards independence in Scotland. But we don't know yet, no, do we?
In the Scottish Government's 2014 White Paper on Independence, and the SNP's former leader Alex Salmond pledged an independence referendum would be a once-in-a-generation opportunity. That was a hostage-to-fortune pledge, was it not?
No, it was complete and arrant nonsense, because neither had any authority to make that task. In Scotland, legally and constitutionally, and I'm a lawyer, sovereignty rests with the people, not with any individual politician. So if the people want a referendum, then they're entitled to have it regardless of who has made any declaration on their behalf. And I feel very strongly about that. The people always come first.
Is there a danger to the SNP that if they proceed with a second independence referendum in autumn 2018, presumably they'll campaign strongly on a pro-EU basis, which is still party policy, that could end up splitting their own support, given a large number of SNP supporters backed a leave vote during the EU referendum?
Well, that has been my view in a number of articles and papers which I've written, because quite obviously a lot of the people who voted to remain, who initially gave support to independence but latterly withdrew that support, are British Unionists. whose primary loyalty will be to London rather than to Edinburgh, whereas there will be people who are nationalist voters who would say, if you go into the European Union, you're voting for the Fourth Reich. In other words, after the Treaty of Lisbon, the European Union now has the right to have its own armed forces and embassies, and it is on its way to becoming a state. Whether that is a federal one or like Germany when the Kaiserreich, I just don't know. But quite obviously, there's a danger if you assume that people who voted for yes 2 years ago will automatically give their support to the SNP or the yes movement because they don't agree with the development of a super-state in Europe, which could be very dangerous.
And finally, ultimately, it's surely for Westminster to determine whether a second independence referendum can go ahead. Realistically, do you think they'll grant that before the UK has exited from the EU?
I can't answer that question. I don't know what's in their mind, and the way the negotiations are going, I'm not sure anybody knows what's in their mind, including themselves. I think there is a danger about that, but I think it's all premature.
Gordon Wilson, many thanks for joining us on World in Focus today. Thank you.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.